I can still feel the warmth of her saliva sliding down my cheek. It was a physical shock, colder than ice despite the heat of the argument, and it smelled faintly of the peppermint gum she was always chewing. In my 62 years of life, through raising a colicky baby, burying a husband far too young, and navigating a 30-year career in a world run by men, I had never been treated with such visceral, deliberate disrespect. I stood frozen in the center of my own kitchen. This was the room where I had baked David's 3rd birthday cake, a lopsided dinosaur he loved anyway. This was the room where I had held my husband James's hand as we waited for the ambulance that night 5 years ago. It was a holy place, the heart of my home. And now Jessica, my daughter-in-law, stood across from me, her chest heaving, her eyes wild, having just spit in my face because I asked her to put the measuring cups back in the drawer. But the true heartbreak, the moment that actually shattered something inside my chest, wasn't the act itself. It was what happened 2 seconds later. I turned my eyes to my son David, the boy I had nursed through fevers, the boy whose college tuition I had paid for by wearing the same winter coat for 10 years. I looked at him waiting for him to be the man his father had raised him to be, waiting for him to shout, to step between us, to demand she leave. Instead, David shrugged. He refused to meet my gaze, staring intently at a scuff mark on the linoleum. "Well, Mom," he mumbled, "you kind of brought this on yourself. You've been making Jessica feel unwelcome since day one." The silence that followed those words was deafening. My own son, my flesh and blood, was telling me I deserved to be humiliated in the sanctuary of my own home. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing the old woman break. I simply wiped my face with a kitchen towel, folded it neatly, because I am not an animal even if they were acting like them, placed it on the counter and walked upstairs. I could feel their eyes on my back. I heard Jessica let out a scoff, a sound of victory. But as I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, staring at the moon illuminating the wedding photo of James and me, the hurt began to harden. It stopped being grief and started becoming fuel. They thought I was a helpless, lonely widow they could bully into submission. They thought I was trapped. They had no idea that by the time the sun came up, the power dynamic in this house was going to shift so violently, they wouldn't know what hit them. Where are you watching from today? I know many of you have felt that sting of betrayal from family. Drop your location in the comments and let me know. Have you ever had to choose between your child and your own dignity? Because that night I had to make a choice that changed everything. I'm Margaret Williams. Until 3 days ago, I thought I was living a peaceful retirement. But peace, I've learned, is something you sometimes have to go to war to protect. Let me take you back to how we got here. Because you need to understand, this wasn't just about measuring cups. This was about 6 months of slow, agonizing erasure. David had moved back in 6 months ago. "Just temporary, Mom," he'd said, standing on my porch with 3 suitcases and a wife who was already checking her phone board. "Just until we get back on our feet after the layoff." I should have known better. David has a way of making temporary situations permanent when they benefit him. And I loved him, so I said yes. That's what mothers do, isn't it? We open the door. We make the bed. We buy the favorite cereal. But within a week, my home wasn't mine anymore. It started small. My favorite reading chair in the living room was suddenly covered in Jessica's coats. The thermostat was always cranked up to 78 degrees, driving my electric bill through the roof. When I mentioned it, Jessica rolled her eyes and said, "God, Margaret, are you really that stingy? It's freezing in here." I swallowed it. Keep the peace, I told myself. They're stressed. Then it was the food. I'd buy groceries for the week. Roasts, fresh vegetables, good coffee, and find them gone in 2 days with dirty plates left under the sofa. Then it was the noise. The late-night TV. The arguments. The way they would walk into a room and stop talking the moment I entered, making it clear I was the intruder in my own life. But that night in the kitchen was the breaking point. I had asked politely for the 3rd time that week if Jessica could please put the kitchen tools back where they belonged so I didn't have to hunt for them. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," she had exploded, her face red with a fury that seemed totally disproportionate. "You're so controlling. No wonder David's father left you." "My late husband didn't leave me," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "He died of a massive heart attack 5 years ago." Facts don't matter to her, I thought, but I said aloud, Jessica, I just want my measuring cups. I am so sick of walking on eggshells, she screamed. This house feels like a museum. We're not allowed to touch anything. That's when David had run in. That's when he had sided with her. That's when she stepped close, her eyes blazing with a hatred that shocked me to my core. You want to know what I really think of you? She snarled. You're a passive-aggressive, lonely old witch. And then the spit. Sitting on my bed that night, listening to the grandfather clock tick in the hallway. Tick-tock, I realized something. I had been waiting for David to grow up. I had been waiting for Jessica to be kind. I had been waiting for them to appreciate me. I was done waiting. I didn't sleep. Instead, I spent the hours between midnight and dawn formulating a plan. I went into my home office and pulled out files I hadn't looked at in years. I logged into accounts. I made notes. I went into the basement storage room, a place David and Jessica never ventured because it was dusty, and I retrieved a box. By morning, I wasn't a victim. I was a general. I went downstairs at 5 a.m. The house was quiet, breathing with me. I started cooking. I didn't make a simple breakfast. I made a weaponized feast. The smell of vanilla, cinnamon, and sizzling bacon wafted through the vents, a sensory trap designed to lure them out of their slumber. I made stacks of fluffy pancakes, golden hash browns, sausages, and my famous French toast. I set the dining room table with my good china, the silver I usually saved for Thanksgiving. I wanted the contrast to be sharp. When David and Jessica finally shuffled down the stairs at 9 a.m., drawn by the aroma, they looked confused. They saw the table laden with treats and exchanged a smug look. I saw David whisper something to Jessica. His body language said, "See? She's trying to make it up to us. We won." "Good," David said aloud, pulling out a chair without asking. "You finally understood your place, Mom. I'm glad you decided to apologize with breakfast." That's when they noticed I wasn't alone. Sitting to my right, sipping coffee from a delicate floral cup, was a man in a perfectly tailored navy suit. Thomas Richardson. David and Jessica froze. "Mom," David stammered. "Who is this?" "David, Jessica," I said, buttering my toast with deliberate, calm precision. "I'd like you to meet Thomas Richardson. He is my attorney." Jessica dropped her coffee mug. Crash. It hit the hardwood floor, ceramic shards skittering under the sideboard. Dark coffee pooled on the wood, staining the rug I had bought in Morocco 30 years ago. But nobody moved to clean it up. Thomas stood up, cool as a cucumber, and extended his hand. "Pleased to meet you both. Your mother has told me quite a lot about you." The way he said it made it very clear that what he had heard was not flattering. "A lawyer?" Jessica's voice cracked. "What do you need a lawyer for, Margaret?" I smiled. "Well, after last night's conversation, where you expressed your feelings about my controlling nature so vividly, I realized I needed to make some adjustments to my estate planning." "Adjustments?" David whispered. Thomas opened his briefcase and removed a thick folder. "Elder abuse situations require immediate legal intervention. Your mother called me at 6 o'clock this morning. Spitting on a senior citizen in their own home qualifies as assault. It is considered a biological hazard." Jessica went pale. "I didn't assault anyone. It was an argument." "Bodily fluids constitute assault," Thomas replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "But we aren't here to discuss criminal charges yet. We are here to discuss the will." "My will," I repeated softly. "I've decided to make some significant changes." "Mom, you're being dramatic." David tried to laugh, but it sounded like a choke. "Jessica apologizes." "Don't you, honey?" Jessica stared at Thomas like he was a rattlesnake. "What changes?" Thomas pulled out a document. "Mrs. Williams had you listed as primary beneficiaries. The house, the savings, the life insurance. Total value approximately $1.2 million. I watched the number land on them. They knew I was comfortable, but they didn't know I was a millionaire. However," Thomas continued, "she has decided to explore other options. The animal shelter. The community college scholarship fund." "You can't do this." Jessica screamed. "We're family." "Family doesn't spit on family," I replied. "Margaret, I'm sorry." Jessica babbled. I was stressed. "It won't happen again." "I know it won't," I agreed. "Because you're moving out." "Moving out." David stood up so fast his chair tipped over. Mom, we can't afford to move out. You know our situation. I am well aware. You are unemployed. Jessica was fired for stealing pens, though we'll get to that later. You have contributed $0 to this household. And now you are leaving. You have 3 days. Where are we supposed to go? David looked like a child. I suggest you figure that out, Thomas said. Because the locks change on Friday. They looked crushed. Defeated. But I wasn't done. I had to see if there was anything left in them worth saving. Actually, I said, reaching for a manila envelope, there is one way you could stay. David lunged for the verbal lifeline. What? Anything. We'll do anything. I opened the envelope and slid 3 photos across the table. They showed David's collection of vintage comic books. The ones he had told me were worthless junk when he moved in, telling me to shove them in the damp basement. First edition Amazing Fantasy number 15, I said. The first appearance of Spider-Man. Dad bought it for you when you were 12. David's eyes bulged. My comics. I listed them on eBay this morning, I said. Current bid is $8,000. You can't sell my comics, he shouted. You abandoned them, I said coldly. Legally they are mine. Now here is the deal. I will let you stay for 90 days. Rent-free. But you sign a contract. You attend counseling. You pay a percentage of your future income to the house. And if you break one rule, one act of disrespect, you are out instantly. And the proceeds from the comics? Keep them. That is my payment for the last 6 months of you sponging off me. That's not fair. David cried. Those are my memories. And this house is my memory, I snapped. And you let your wife spit on it. Do we have a deal? Or do I accept the next bid? They signed. They hated it, but they signed. I wish I could tell you that was the end of it. That they learned their lesson and we lived happily ever after. But people like Jessica don't change overnight. She lasted 11 days. It started with the little things. Leaving dishes in the sink. Rolling her eyes. But I was ready. I documented everything. Photos. Notes. The breaking point came when I found her in my bedroom, rummaging through my desk. I need to know if you can actually afford to help David start his business, she yelled, dropping the pretense. He needs $30,000 for a landscaping truck. We need to know if you're holding out on us. I pulled out my phone. I'm recording this. You are invading my privacy. You are out. She laughed. David won't let you. But when David came up, dragged into the middle of it, the truth finally came out. We need the money. Jessica screamed at him. Tell her. Tell her we're $30,000 in debt. Tell her I sold the car. The room went silent. You sold the car? David whispered. To pay off the credit cards I maxed out, she sobbed. We're drowning, David. And she's sitting on $1 million. I looked at my son. He looked broken. He looked at his wife who had lied to him, who had spit on his mother, who was now demanding my money. Get out, David said. Jessica stopped crying. What? Apologize to my mother, David said, his voice shaking but firm. Or we are both homeless. Because I am not choosing you over the woman who kept a roof over our heads while you stole from her. It was the first time he had stood up to her. And it broke the spell. Jessica apologized. It was weak, but it was there. I didn't kick them out that day. Instead, I sat them down and I opened the books. I showed them exactly what retirement looks like. I have $600,000 in savings, I told them. And I am 62. If I live to be 90, that is $21,000 a year. That is poverty level if I am not careful. I am not rich. I am surviving. They stared at the numbers. They finally understood. I wasn't a dragon hoarding gold. I was a widow trying not to become a burden. They got jobs. Humble jobs. David stocked shelves. Jessica scanned groceries. They paid me $500 a month. They attended the counseling. But here is the secret I kept from them. The secret that warms my heart every time I look at them now, 3 years later. That day with the lawyer, I received another phone call. My father's estate had a forgotten asset. A commercial building that was sold that very afternoon. I have $2.5 million sitting in a trust fund that they know nothing about. I didn't tell them because I knew that if I gave them the money, I would ruin them. They needed to learn to survive on their own. They needed to learn that dignity comes from work, not from inheritance. Today, David is a manager. Jessica is an accountant. They have their own apartment. They are kind. They are respectful. And one day when I pass on, they will open my will and find one last surprise. A letter that says, "You earned this." Not by being my son, but by becoming a man. Sometimes the greatest act of love is saying no. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. And tell me, have you ever had to use tough love to save your family? I read every comment. This is Margaret signing off. See you in the next video. What are you doing? I asked from the doorway. She jumped. I was looking for a pin. In my bank statement folder?